Yes, let's go. We just got details on the next season of Marvel Snap, and the theme is going to be the Black Order. I'm pretty fired up about this season, but as we do, I'm going to give some star ratings to all 5 of the cards officially announced, and at the end of the video I'm going to have the spotlight cash schedule. It's all for the entire month of February, so you can kind of plan out your resources for the cards that you want to save for. That's probably the most important thing. My strategy typically is find 1 or 2 cards that I'm very interested in that fit my playstyle, that seem very fun, save my resources for those so that I can open them up guaranteed on release. And of course, the power level kind of influences things as well, so that's why we got to give them some star ratings. And I gotta tell you guys, I think there's a couple cards that people are maybe just sleeping on, because a lot of the abilities that I'm going to be talking about, they're not overly exciting, but they're going to fit a mold in a few decks, I think, that's really going to help out those decks. And the focus here is clearly discard. That's a big portion of these cards, but then also 1-cost cards and maybe some like burst decks. We're going to get into it in just a bit here, but really quickly, we have the cosmetics for the season pass that you can acquire should you choose to purchase it, and it looks pretty awesome. Dude, that death variant looks fantastic. The Ebony Maw is actually pretty fresh as well. In-Hyuk Lee seems to be the lead artist for this season. You're going to see a lot of his artwork coming up, which is awesome, and the card backs look fantastic as well, especially the Infinity Gauntlet. I love that one. So anyways, let's break down these cards, starting off with the season pass card, Black Swan. And speaking of sleeper cards, we're gonna kick it off with the season pass card, and that is Black Swan, a 3/5 on reveal until the end of next turn. Your 1-cost cards cost 0. I'm giving this card 5 stars. I think this card is busted. Okay, this is going to be such a good tool for all kinds of different archetypes. You can really plug and play this card into a lot of stuff. And I know it's like 1-cost discounted to 0. That doesn't seem like much, but here's a few play lines to just give you guys an idea. Okay, we use Bishop, we use Black Swan on turn 5, so that turn 6 you play a whole bunch of cards and you play Hit Monkey, and bam, your Hit Monkey's crazy. All those cards were free. Bishop gets a lot of power. That's certainly an excellent line of play. But actually, I think everyone's drawn to that, but I'm thinking about some earlier lines of play, stuff like Destroy. So if you play Black Swan on turn 3, not only is that just 5 power on the board, which is just fantastic. Like, this is a premium stat line with an insane upside. So that's just broken, right? But we play Black Swan on turn 3. Turn 4, you play Deadpool. Let's start with Forge. You go Forge, Deadpool, you play Yondu, Squirrel Girl, whatever else. And you can play Killmonger. Because all those cards I just mentioned, Nico Minoru, whatever else, X23, all those cards are 1-drops and they all cost 0. You just dish them out onto the board, and you play Killmonger in the very same turn, you destroy them, which makes your death basically 0, and you get Deadpool back in the hand with double power, you get X23 giving you +1 energy, Nico's doing stuff. Like, there's just all kinds of amazing value on that follow-up turn after Black Swan. Now, of course, you have to draw those cards, you have to have them in hand, you got to play them, but let's be real. Like, you have a couple 1-cost cards and you play them, the value has been returned tenfold, because this is a 3/5. You just get 1 discount. That's like looking like a 2/5 essentially what you're paying, but then you got on reveal synergies. We can use it with Beast. So you can use just a bunch of on reveal 1-drops and then Beast back either Black Swan so that you can do it again a later turn with more 1-drops that you draw, or on those 1-drops to bring them back to your hand so that they're 0 costs again that you can play another time. It's just wild. Now, these cards aren't going to read as 0 costs when they're actually on the board. When they hit the board, they're going to go back to their 1-cost effect. So things like Kazar could buff them up or anything like that. They're going to be 1-cost once more, but Beast is going to bring them back and make them 0. Guys, it's crazy. I know I'm talking madman right now, but there's just a lot of potential here. A 3/5 stat line, it's just crazy. And if we look at past season pass cards, they're always good. It's probably for financial reasons, but they always seem to find a way. Scar was excellent, still is one of like a top 10 win rate card. Even Sebastian Shaw being one of the weaker season pass cards in recent memory was still very good on release and is pretty excellent in a surfer build. So it's like, man, and then you keep going further back. And Miss Marvel was broken, Loki was broken, Elsa was broken at the time. So yeah, Black Swan, probably going to be worth it if you pick up season passes. But hey, stay tuned. Snap or pass is going to be tomorrow for Black Swan. I'm going to go through a full list of 1-drops and all the synergies and deck lists that you could possibly need for this card's release. All right, that's going to do it for me in this card. I'm pretty excited. I think it's crazy. I think people are maybe sleeping on it. I hope they wake up. Let's get to the next card. Next up is Supergiant, and I think this one might be one of the more controversial topics of this video. And it's for the reason that she's changed drastically from what she used to be. So prior to this card that you see here, she used to be a 1/2 on reveal. All cards played this turn and next turn don't reveal until the game ends. So her ability was better and her stat line was a lot more flexible to when you could play a card with that ability. Now she's a 4/5 and it's on reveal. All cards played next turn don't reveal until the game ends. So it's just a 1-turn effect that you gotta set up. And it's definitely powerful. I think the argument being that there's a lot of cards that you can counter, a lot of archetypes that you can counter with this ability. So we're looking at things like Leech, obviously is a pretty good counter. Everybody hates Leech. But on top of that, there's probably better options like countering Sarah, or maybe even Destroy, because Destroy wants to destroy a lot of stuff every single turn, and then they get stuck on turn 5 if Supergiant is played on curve. So there's absolutely a lot of potential, but there's some areas that I don't really love about this card. And let me explain. So one of them being, how do you fit this into a deck? This is one of those tech options, kind of like Mobius. Now that he's a 3 cost, it's like, yeah, I could put him in my deck. I could probably shut something down every now and then. But then sometimes I'm going to run into a deck that just wants to play Iron Man on turn 5. And they're not going to really care if it reveals or not. And I'm not even going to know unless I got Daredevil out there if they played Iron Man. So have I done anything? I'm a bit of a tempo loss playing a 4/5 unless I discount it with Zabu. And all of a sudden I've got all these if, ands, whens, it's too much. It's too much. And at that point, you're probably cutting the card out of your list because it's not actually synergizing with a whole lot. The 1-turn setup is kind of weird. With this sort of effect, we've looked at historically like Invisible Woman utilization. So you're looking at like the 2 most prominent decks for Invisible Woman in the history that I know of is essentially Hela MODOK and then Cerebro stuff to hide Cerebro, and then it works with Invisible Woman. And I don't think either of those decks really benefit from Supergiant unless the Hela MODOK deck you're running Magic, so that you can play Supergiant on turn 5, hide Hela on 6, and play MODOK on 7. But that's a bit clunky in itself too, right? So I don't really love it. There could be a new thing where you're trying to hide cards and then you play Eliath, right? Because your opponent is going to not be able to reveal those cards until the end of the game. So if you hide them on turn 5, you play Eliath, you're guaranteed to destroy them because they won't reveal until essentially like the next invisible turn being the final turn, the end of the game triggers, right? So that's a possible synergy. With Daredevil, you can see the cards should you play it on 4 and they can't reveal on 5. You'll be able to see what they played. So these are all cute and nice, but I just don't think it's going to be put together into a deck that's going to work. I will say this, though. I think she has potential in Conquest. Conquest has always done kind of well with a lot of tech cards because you just have a lot of answers for what your opponent brings to the table. And you could find out in a Conquest match pretty quickly if Supergiant is going to be relevant. If they're playing Sarah or something like that. If they're really trying to do a big setup on turn 5, well, you can use Supergiant to really disrupt them. Now, if you don't have Daredevil, you don't know what they played, it could lead to a bad situation, because if we're hiding cards on 5, that means we're locking in on turn 6 essentially. You're going in on turn 6 thinking, I shut them down, I disrupted them, this is awesome, I have an advantage. And then you play out turn 6, the game ends, you're locked in for that double cube. And what happens? It was a very powerful card that they didn't really care that it was hidden. It's fine. So, gosh, I don't know. I see upsides that, you know, there's Professor X is another counter, you hide that and stuff like this. But I just think this is too clunky, and the 1-turn setup, it's just not going to find a way. So I'm giving her 2 stars. I'm not very excited about this card. It is a Series 4 release, though. If we look back at the history of Series 4 releases, you're looking at Meek, who's probably the worst card of January. Then you got Havoc, probably the worst card of December. Martyr, the worst card of November, no doubt. And then Man-Thing in October, possibly the worst card of that month. Still pretty decent, but not that exciting. And that's basically since then is when they've been having 1 Series 4 release per month, and they don't look too great. So just looking at that alone makes me think, yeah, this might not be very strong. Time will tell, though. Time will tell. Time will tell. And I would love to see this card actually be good and accessible to a lot of players. Anyway, so let's get to the next one. Next up is CULL Obsidian. I'm giving this guy 4 stars. Now, one thing you're going to notice, he's got 10 power. So kind of gone back and forth. This guy has changed a lot in very recently, which is interesting to see. In the OTA changes, they're making changes. It's crazy. It's a datamined cards. Let's go. So anyways, 410, you can only play this where you have a 1-cost card. Previously, the effect used to be, I believe it was ongoing, can't be destroyed, and then he could only be played where there was an Infinity Stone. Now it's a little bit more flexible in that you don't need to actually have Thanos in your collection. You can play this card by just running a bunch of 1-drops. But let me tell you, it's still amazing for Thanos. And I think that's going to be the #1 deck you're going to find Obsidian, because it's just so easy to play stones and to have an option for CULL Obsidian to be played. So I feel like the condition here is so easy to meet. And if you compare this card to Crossbones, it's actually disgraceful. Like what they're doing to Crossbones is just rude. This is like one of the more true instances of power creep that I've seen in Marvel Snap, let me tell you. Because Crossbones essentially is a 4/8 and can only be played at a winning location. Harder condition, less power. Obsidian's just better. Now, they might have made him 10 power to be in Shang-Chi range so that he can't be destroyed, and he doesn't have that benefit of being a 6-cost or a 1-cost, so we can't get protected by Kyera. So you might have to look at running armor with him, but that's not that much of a downside. I think it's pretty solid, because a really nice play line could be having Nebula out on the field, and then you play CULL Obsidian at the Nebula location on turn 4, followed up with Professor X on turn 5 to just lock it in. That's just so much power that it really helps out Professor X. And then on top of that, we're discounting Scar. Every 10 power card that's on the field, you discount Scar by 2, which is just great. So now could be this Thanos, Scar, CULL Obsidian deck. Man, it could have Blob, it could have Professor X, and then just all the Infinity Stones. Like that probably is going to be an amazing shell. I wouldn't doubt it. So I'm giving him 4 stars because I'm not going to sleep on cards that have high power. I'm not doing that anymore. I've done it a couple times, and time after time after time, when a card has the potential to give you a lot of power for its cost, and especially without such a negative effect, yeah, it's probably going to do pretty good. It's probably going to win some games. So I think this guy is going to be pretty good this season, but we'll find out. We'll find out. You can also get discounted by Zabu and stuff like that. Killmonger, maybe pretty good counter. Shang-Chi, a pretty good counter. Both very popular. But man, there's ways to get around that. So I think it's going to be just fine. All right. Let's go to the next one. Next up is CORVUS GLAIVE. My guy got a buff. Let's go. So 3/5 now. Used to be a 3/4. On reveal, discard 2 cards from your hand to get +1 max energy. So I had this card at 4 stars and I had pretty high hopes for it. I still think it's going to be a lot better than maybe I'm even giving it credit for right now. But there is, some awkwardness when it comes to discarding cards that are not targeted. Typically, those ones get cut from a lot of discard lists because you're looking to discard your APOC or your Swarm very specifically, reliably. So Blade, Lady Sif, even Colleen Wing, these sorts of cards are going to give you more advantage over what's going to happen in the match and just allow you to plan out your turns. Anyways, with Corvus here, he's a 3/5, which is a great stat line. We've seen this with Lady Sif. He's discarding 2 cards. That's pretty good as well. Hellcow is a 4/8. It has the potential to be a 3/8 if you got Zabu out on the board, which can really help out. And he's going to discard 2 cards. I think what people are getting caught up in, though, is why would I want the +1 max energy for a discard list? And I hear you. A lot of the times you don't really need that. If anything, on the final turn, you're just trying to play out your hand so that Dracula can hit APOC or something along those lines. And I don't think the focus of Corvus is the energy. I think that's just like a cherry on top. That's just like a little bit of a bonus helper. What really matters is just you have a 3-cost card that can discard 2 cards pretty reliably, which is going to help when you got Swarm. Or maybe if we haven't drawn Hela yet, you can discard 2 cards, get some max energy going, and then ramp into your MODOK Hela combo or something like that. Or maybe you don't even need MODOK because you discarded 2 cards that are high power. You just play Hela. You're good to go. Even Ghost Rider, stuff like this could be great. But of course, the easier go-tos are like Swarm, APOC, a card that we're going to talk about next. Don't worry, haven't forgot about it. Wolverine, X-23. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of cards that like to be discarded. And if you build your deck accordingly, it's going to be a good effect with the bonus of getting the energy. So I'm going to give him 3 stars because I think he's going to be very specific in discard lists, and he might get cut for some more target discard in specific lists. But I'm sure if people play discard, they know this guy will find a way to be good. Like if there's a card that is gonna discard cards, it's gonna find a way. There's Swordmaster is a 3/6 and he just discards 1. This guy's discarding 2, which is an upside in most decks, with the upside of as well as getting max energy. So I have pretty high hopes. I'm gonna pick him up. I love the character and everything, and this looks fun to play with in discard lists. So he's like high on my list for wanting to purchase, but time will tell how strong he's going to be. And lastly, we have Proxima Midnight. So Proxima Midnight, man, a 4/7 out of nowhere. Used to be a 4/6 for the longest time. Now she's a 4/7. All these stat changes to these cards, man. It's crazy how many of them have changed. This is a record-breaking number of changes, very closely to the official announcement and release. I mean, these cards could still change moving forward. We saw Beta Ray Bill get +1 power, I think, like just a few days before his release. So you'd never really know. But here we have Midnight, 4/7. When this is discarded, jumps to your lowest power location that isn't full. So my first thought with this card was I wasn't too thrilled because I was thinking like Wolverine gets discarded. He ends up being 4 power for free on the board. It goes to a random location. This is going to a location with lowest power, but maybe that's even better than random because we could probably control where this ends up going, or at least when we discard it, we know where it's going to go, which is always nice. Information is great. And we can also somewhat control because we can fill up other locations to limit her options to where she could fall. So yeah, I think this is going to be a strong card, man. I'm giving her 4 stars. We've seen all kinds of these cards that become either free or become 1 costs. I'm looking at like Miles Morales, Stature. These sorts of things are always good. Energy cheating, energy saving for power output has always found a way. So I have no doubt that this is going to be a good card in discard. You run this with Corvus, like I was just saying, right? So Corvus, going to discard 2 cards. He hits Proxima Midnight. That's fantastic. That is net 12 power for 3 energy spent. And you get +1 max energy, and he's going to discard another thing. Like, what? Like, crazy. Discard is coming to play this month. And then you got Hellcow doing the same thing. MODOK, man, if you got Proxima, you got Swarm, APOC, Wolverine, X-23 in hand, and you play MODOK, cash money. It's going to be unreal. It's going to be so much power on the board out of nowhere. Your opponent's not even going to know what to do. So yeah, I think this is a pretty great card. Good power output. We'll see if the stat line actually sticks. But you know what? I actually think it does make the difference because now if you have to play the 4/7, and I know if people know my videos, I'm eating my words, but if you have to play the 4/7, it's not that bad, right? It has the upside of being discarded and then being free. And then worst case scenario, you play a 4/7 and like, hopefully you don't come to that point. You probably won't have to because your deck's probably stacked with discarding cards. But good shot that if it does happen, it's not too bad of a situation. Man, it's interesting. It's fascinating what they're doing with these cards. They definitely seem strong, except for the one card that everyone thought was going to be broken. So I don't even know. Let's check out the Spotlight Cash schedule so you guys have an idea of what to save up for. All right, so here is the February Spotlight schedule. So this is kind of just to give you an idea of what cards are coming around and what they're going to be packaged with. When I'm looking at this right away, I can tell the Supergiant week looks very appealing because the variants look amazing. And also those are very strong cards that pair well together. But the problem being that they're all Series 4. So you can get them all for just 3,000 tokens a piece, which makes me think unless you don't own any of them, that's not a very worthwhile week to use Spotlight Caches. I'm thinking Corvus Glaive's week because I don't have Gladiators, so that seems really nice. And they're all Series 5, and the variants look pretty awesome. Isn't it crazy the amount of stat changes these cards have underwent? I mean, we're talking all of them at this point have had changes. So yeah, datamined has become less and less reliable, but always kind of interesting because we still kind of knew the effects and what type of month this was going to be. But the stat tweaks make these a lot more interesting cards, I think. A lot of people were thinking of passing on February. I'm thinking you can't now on a few of the cards anyhow, especially if you like discard. If you're a discard lover, this is the month, man. This is going to be a good one, and the characters are awesome. So I'm fired up. Let me know what you guys think about this month in the comments below. Which cards you think are going to be strongest? Which you think are going to be weakest? Am I wrong? Am I right? And the stat changes, how do you feel about that being so last minute? I think it's all right. It's kind of neat. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.